250 newsroom positions, okay? We're sitting now at around like 75 or 80. And there are beats that we just don't have now that we used to have back then. I mean, we used to have here in Chapel Hill, I think we had a reporter who covered the Orange County government, we had a reporter who covered Chapel Hill, we had a UNC reporter, just strictly University of Chapel Hill. And today, I think we have one reporter in Orange County, who kind of has to cover a lot of that. And we used to have, like I said, I covered NC State at one point. Back then we had a Duke reporter, NC State reporter, we had a UNC reporter, we had a UNC system reporter, and we had other reporters who covered some of the smaller colleges. Now we have one higher ed reporter. So it's really hard to be on top of everything when you have those kinds of reductions. But it's even worse when you think about what's happening across the country. I mean, we've lost something like, I think it's like 40,000 reporting jobs, since 2004, and it's been down somewhere, but and like 2,500 papers, I think, have gone out of business, which is, I think, represents something like a quarter of the newspapers across the country. And so what happens when you lose that? I'm going to talk about another story that I did. Last year, I got a tip that, let's see if I can get this right story, okay. Last year I got a tip, somebody called me and said, there's this domestic violence shelter in northeastern North Carolina that put in a hidden nanny cam, in their shelter. I was watching, the women who were staying there, and I was like, wow, that's pretty strange, let me try to confirm that. But in the course of confirming it, I that made me want to check other things. Okay, one of them being, their nonprofits, their tax exempt status, their filings with the IRS, and what I discovered was they had lost their tax exempt status, but the state did not know that, and so for years the state was continuing to give them money. And in fact, the nonprofit, the shelter, was giving the state phony tax returns and a phony audit. This was a shelter serving 4 counties in northeastern North Carolina, a very rural place, and we did a number of stories on that. But if you live there, and I should back up and say, once we started reporting this, that shelter was shut down. The state cut off funding. There's now a criminal investigation, and so on and so forth. You would not know if you lived there right now that shelter is closed if you relied on what's left of local media out there. If the local paper, which is very small, I suspect only has one person. I don't think it's done a story on it. And the TV stations that are sort of, in that region, but that's not their home base, because it's not a big enough market, they haven't really picked up on it either. So, I mean, just imagine, this is an area, 4-county area, in a rural, kind of struggling part of the state that does not have a place for, somebody who's dealing with a, domestic violence situation, does not have a place to go. And that to me, says volumes about, this news desert phenomenon we're seeing around the state, and around the country. And, there's, the latest report, talks about, I got this up, just talks about, the loss to citizens, because of this. And I'll just read it, although you can see it right there. The loss of local journalism has been accompanied by the malignant spread of misinformation and disinformation, political polarization, eroding trust in the media, and a yawning digital economic divide among citizens. I think we all probably might have some anecdotes about what we're seeing individually. In communities without a credible source of local news, voter participation declines, corruption in both government and business increases. I mean, when I talk about that shelter, this went on for years and years. They were submitting phony documentation and getting your tax dollars. and local residents end up paying more in taxes and at checkout. So, this is a huge problem. I wish I had the answer to solve it. I kind of go back to just sort of a basic feeling that, well, I'll tell you one area that I thought was really, has been a bright spot. Since the 2016 election, and you guys may be well aware that, the Washington Post and the New York Times have done exceedingly well in recent years. And I think it's been reported as such, that citizens had a real wake-up call on what was happening, and they realized that they really needed to know what was going on, and the Times and the Post were delivering, and they were being rewarded financially. Their number of subscribers went up dramatically, and so my feeling is, you want to solve the problem, is that you just go back to the basic thing. If we do our jobs to tell you what you need to know, and particularly in cases where people in power don't want you to know that, personally, I think you'll support us. You just have to do that. And what I would hope is that people reach out to their local newspapers, or I don't know, a lot of times you're seeing websites, whatever, but their local news sources, and seek that and want that and praise it when they see it, and when they don't see it, tell them when they don't. So that's kind of my speech here, and I wanted to give you guys a lot of room for questions. So are we good?
Sorry, this is a what do you think question, but I'm asking you to share your opinion about the importance of parsing the lanes between business, entertainment, and reporting, and how do we ensure better that those lanes are distinguished with borders. In other words, if I may use the analogy, in medicine, we have to take an exam. We have to demonstrate competencies. We have to pass certain thresholds to demonstrate those competencies and be certified, such as the case in law, etc. And every year we have to reclaim that certification. Is there such a entity with reporting that would distinguish a reporter from an entertainer?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a subject of a lot of debate.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. I should have given you the. I think you're asking is there a certification and sort of a and maybe a continuing effort, standardization of, okay, this person has met the qualifications to be a reporter, to be an editor, to be out there doing that kind of work. Am I getting that right?
Perfect.
Okay. And the answer is no, there isn't. I mean, there is not. And yes, there's been some talk about, should there be, should there be a certain. The tricky part to all that is government would have to do that, right? I mean, and so, you've got government basically, in a regulatory position over people who will then be reporting on that government, and maybe reporting on that very official that, like, hey buddy, you're only working half days here. I see you down at Fred's bar for the entire afternoon. So I don't know how to answer that. I've thought about that. I don't have a good answer for, like, what do you do to, I guess, increase that kind of confidence among the reporting crowd by saying, okay, here's how you know that this is legitimate work.
Or establish thresholds of behavior.
I'm sorry.
Certified doctors, we have our continuing medical education credits, totally private, separate from the government.
Okay.
Reporting group.
Well, maybe that's a possibility, that you have some sort of private, entity that does that sort of work. I don't know. It's certainly food for thought. Should I give the mic out or something? So
I'll stand up and try to speak loudly.
But if you could repeat the question for people who are watching on the stream.
Oh, sure.
So when digitalization of the news came about, it seemed like nobody wanted to pay to read articles on their computer, and like you were referencing, the things you aren't paying for aren't very good at all. So people started to pay again for their subscriptions. Are the numbers showing that? Are more people buying their news instead of just getting it for free online?
Okay, did anybody not hear that question?
The online people don't hear it.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, so your question is about whether or not people are, since a lot of news is now gravitating over to the internet, are more people paying to get digital subscriptions, with news organizations? And I would say definitely, with like the New York Times and the Washington Post. I mean, they've really grown dramatically with their digital subscriptions. We've had some growth in digital subscriptions. I don't think it's certainly not matching sort of the heyday of our, traditional paper subscriber days. But in a lot of ways, we're all being kind of pushed that way because, there's so much cost in creating and delivering a newspaper. It's an actual tangible product. You have to put it in trucks. You have to, drive it all over the place. And while I love it, I mean, I'm still a guy who takes out the paper and folds it out over the kitchen table and goes through it and, plays one of the, jumble or whatever at the end. I mean, I still like that. But, obviously, the digital version you can take anywhere, pick it up off your phone, your tablet. And so, I think the industry in general is really trying to push a lot of us into, digital subscriptions. But I don't think, there's debate about this. Some people think we can survive without people having to pay a subscription, but I just haven't really seen that work. I have seen that in some ways it brings out the worst in the news, and that it brings out a lot of clickbait, quite honestly. So anyhow, okay. Right here. So
we've established there's no real certification for reporters, that anybody who can have a laptop can be a reporter, entitled to the privileges of being a reporter. We're also established that the industry is now being driven by profit, because if you don't sell the papers, you're not going to be in existence. So how do you balance that when you're looking at what to print? The biggest censorship is deciding what to print and what not to print. So for example, if it sells a lot of papers to write articles about UNC athletics versus say it doesn't sell a lot of papers to write about Coach K's grandson being involved in a DUI, how do you decide what you cover and what you don't?
Did we cover Coach K's grandson being pulled over?
Not many times to the extent you covered other things.
Did we cover it?
Yeah.
Did we break that story?
A little.
We broke that story. It got quite a bit of prominence, and it got a big readership. And you're talking about one athlete being charged with a DWI.
Yeah.
Now, is that the equivalent of 18 years of academic fraud?
No. I'm just
Okay.
I'm asking the question.
By the way, I need to repeat the question too.
But I'm asking the question in being, obviously, there's certain stories that resonate, and then there's certain stories, like you maybe put out this NAACP thing, and it doesn't resonate. And so where do you make the decision? Well, maybe there was allegations of misspending there, but it's not really selling. And does somebody make that decision? Like, obviously, the UNC thing, a lot of people are interested in, so you keep covering that, appropriately so. But how do you maybe stop reporting on something that should be covered, but nobody's interested in it, so it just fades away?
Yeah, that's a good question. You're asking, like, if the interest isn't there, do we continue to cover it?
Yeah.
And what I would say is that, when I'm looking to cover a story, I'm not looking at, like, how many readers are they going to get for this? I'm thinking, is this something that people need to know? And I'm particularly going to be interested if I realize that this is something that people need to know, and somebody in charge doesn't really want them to know it. That's kind of, and part of that's because that's my bailiwick. I get a little extra time. I kind of bounce around to different topics as you can see. I did a story about a nonprofit shelter in northeastern North Carolina, and I followed up on it. Did a number of stories about it. There's probably more people in Orange County than there is in that whole 4-county area. But I thought it was important, and I saw that it was clearly something wrong, and it was criminal.
And that's what I'm asking you. What happens if your paper doesn't support you, right? And that's my question.
Well, hopefully a good newspaper would support that, and not worry about like, hey Dan, instead of writing about that nonprofit shelter out there, why don't you go write about some celebrity who got into trouble? Nobody comes to me and tells me to do that. When I am exposing something and I think that it needs to be exposed, usually I get the support. Now sometimes I do, have to, some things happen, some news breaks in a certain way, and they just need my help, and I try to help. But I'm not sitting here looking around and saying, okay, well, if I go chase over here, I'll get 100,000 clicks versus chasing over here where I'd only get like 2,000.
But is that happening in other less reputable papers?
Yeah. Not necessarily newspapers. I think it's happening in a lot of media.
That's
that's the term clickbait exists for a reason. So that is a problem. I want to make sure I catch. I thought somebody in back had a hand up first. Yeah, right there.
Dan, are you or somebody at N&O going to continue to study or report the effect of moving Consolidated University to Raleigh?
Your question is about whether or not we're going to continue to cover this effort to move the UNC system headquarters to Raleigh, and I'd say that's a pretty good bet that we will. What drove that? What impact it'll have? Those are very important questions. So I believe we will. I think we just had something in the paper the other day about one of the board of governors moving over to the board of transportation, and this was somebody who's very outspoken about this was a bad move and shouldn't be happening. And I know we referenced it in that story. So it's definitely it's an interesting story, and it's an important story. How did this happen and why? Okay, now I'm not sure who was next. Jim, I think you were next. Okay, all right. I think Al, you're next.
Can you tell us about the process you go through from you get an idea and then it ends up a printed or
Story.
online story? What's your process to get there?
Okay, the question is, what's my process for sort of the germination of the story to actually getting to that story? And it happens different ways. Sometimes we get a tip. We get told. Like I said, I learned about this nanny cam at this shelter, and that struck me as so strange that I thought there had to be more to it than just this. So I started checking. Different places that I could check to find out more about it in the 1990s, and correspondence requests I made with the state agencies that had oversight over this shelter kind of told me that. Sometimes, one time I was in a city council meeting in Durham, this was, 1988, 1999, and one of the council members, it was the start of the meeting, so you usually kind of have sort of the some happy talk and proclamations and stuff like that. And so different members were talking about what they had done in the last month or something. And one of them said, well, I went on a sister cities trip to Toyama, Japan, and I learned that they have a city bird and a city tree. And that was it. All right. And I'm sitting there. Well, I'm just curious. What do you guys think when you hear that? Anybody want to offer a thought?
Who paid for it?
Yeah. Who paid for it and how much did it cost? That's what I thought. And sure enough, it was like a couple $1,000, which citizens of Durham paid. That was kind of a little perk that the city council members had, that they could go visit these sister cities with their travel, their travel allowance, which they did, and then they would come back, and there really wasn't much benefit to the citizens, and so I started getting the bills and the travel information, and I think roughly over, I don't know, I say maybe it's 10 years or something, they'd spent like roughly $88,000 on this, and they really didn't have anything to show for it other than sort of like, international goodwill, I sort of raised the question, like, we should be spending that kind of money. And in fact, after I wrote the story, they stopped spending it, for a while. I mean, those trips ended. They may have come back, several years later, but, and I don't know how they're run now, but back, that's sort of another example of how a story comes to be. Some stories are obvious, it comes over the scanner that, somebody was shot, there was a murder at such and such a place. So you call the police, try to run out there, whatever, others, like you said, you get tips, you see something, you hear something like I heard, and you think, I think there's a story there that people ought to know about, and you pursue it. Okay. Back here in the red.
I was wondering whether you have to provide your own insurance against libel suits, or if that's something that's covered by the N&O, and have you ever been sued for libel?
Okay. Question is, do I pay for my libel insurance, and or does the N&O provide that, and have I ever been sued? The N&O does have libel insurance, so yes, I am, and other reporters are covered. Have I ever been sued? No. Oh wait, Jim, you go ahead.
That's right. Just as an epilogue to that's not my question, but I'm remembering a thing about Rob's question, that when Tucker Carlson, which is the highest rated news show, when he was sued for libel, the defense of his show was that it is not truthful, that nobody expected to be truthful. I'm reading right now, it says, and it worked. The judge says the general tenor of the show should inform a viewer that he is not stating actual facts about the topic. And he discusses intent, and what he discusses is instead engaging in exaggeration and non-literal commentary. But it is believed by a lot of people. My question, see if, well, I'd like you to, first of all, see if you agree with my overall assessment and what you think about it. Today, the one thing that I believe we can say with some degree of safety is that the News and Observer is read by people who work in high government offices, people who have high public offices. So they see that, and therefore they worry about it, and then it causes them to think about what they might do. On the other hand, Merrill Guillory, formerly the News and Observer, just retired from our faculty, says that every year he asks in his big introductory journalism class, where do you get your news? And the number of those who get it from newspapers has dwindled from like 60% of the last 10 years, 60% to 50%. It is now zero. Zero. So demographically, the generation that is coming on right now, they get their news from social media. I'm not even sure I know what that means when I say that. But they get their news off Facebook. And so they have no idea who Dan Cave is, and the News and Observer is not something that is part of their reality structure. How do we get here? So how do you respond to that? And what, if you agree with me on that, what's the implication of that?
Dan, can you repeat that question?
Well, I guess I also need to, tell our folks our outside audience that you talked about Tucker Carlson and that court case in which, you know, the defense was, you know, well, I'm an entertainer, really. I think I'm an entertainer. I'm not. You can't expect me. You shouldn't be holding me accountable for the things I say. And he got away with it, right? So that's the first thing. But and then your question was about the fact that you know, younger folks are, you know, as Farrell Gilroy pointed out, with his class of successive classes, fewer and fewer of the students were actually reading the News and Observer. They're getting their news off of social media, and the fact is, actually, they are reading the News and Observer a lot of times because somebody's posting a News and Observer story on their Facebook page, or tweeting it out, or Instagramming, or whatever. You know, all those different. You know, they're just that, but they're not. They are not people who are going to the NNO. You know, at the start of their news gathering hunt. You know, and so, you know, I think in some ways, you know, we've tried to amp up our presence on those social media forums so that people, you know, do come into contact with our news, and we hope that, you know, when they read it and see it, that they start to realize, you know, well, maybe I should be, you know, we should be a subscriber, you know, a digital subscriber, you know, so that I can just regularly go to that page and see what they're reporting. You know, it's the problem with social media is the way we all set it up. You know, we set it up. It aligns with our interests, aligns with our friends. You know, and that, you know, can cause you to be, you know, to miss out on things that you should know because you're not going to a source that actually has a goal of trying to deliver you a wide diet of things that are happening out there. So I wish I had an answer to that, but I mean, I think that's what we're trying to do, at least, is just trying to, you know, let these people know, you know, that we're out there, you know, sharing our stuff, and then trying to bring them back, you know, through social media, like that.
Yeah.
Right behind you.
Dan, what you do? Did you point to me?
I was just saying. I should point to you, but I realized that I think you were. I'm going to get you next. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Sorry. Well, I'm sorry.
Dan, what you do is incredibly important. Because what you do, you mentioned it, is you reveal things people don't want revealed, as opposed to what happens a lot in media today, repeating press releases. Okay, that's worthless. You and people like Maggie Haberman on the New York Times have fulfilled a tremendous need in our society, all the way up from local school boards to the Congress to beyond. But what seems to be the case is this tremendous need is married to a dying business model. And we've been debating how to fund this so that we keep people like you, give you the time to develop a story that may take a month or two, but is it terribly important? Which leads me to my question, what about public funding of a certain type of media? We have National Public Radio now. What about public funding, nonpartisan, as best we can do it, to fund this kind of work that we need?
Well, first of all, thanks very much. I mean, I wish some of these students, you know, that Jim talked about, had heard what you said. It would help us. That would help a lot. But your question is, you know, should there be some kind of public funding, you know, to try to help, you know, lift these newsrooms that are struggling, and you know, and there's been talk about that. You know, I think that the big rescue, you know, bill that didn't fly in the Senate, maybe even had some provision along those lines, like a tax break or something. And I have mixed feelings about it because, number one, if all of if newsrooms find themselves kind of dependent on, you know, funding, is that going to change their ability to report when, you know, that funding source is doing something they shouldn't? You know, I worry about that. I mean, I think, yeah, part of me, I look at what happened with you know, New York Times and the Washington Post with Donald Trump. You know, people realized they really needed to subscribe to those newspapers, and mostly digitally, you know, because you know they were being, you know, solid watchdogs, you know, about what was going on, and so, you know, I think there's a way to make that connection at the local level. I just haven't figured out how to do it, where people realize that, you know, I need that for my state government, I need that for my local government, I need it for my school board, I need it for my police department. You know, not that they're all corrupt, but in case that's there, you know, somebody's there to tell me, you know, and I don't know. I mean, have we just not come up with the right kind of ad campaign? Have we, you know, I mean, there is another avenue here, and that has to do with how much Google and Facebook suck up all the ad revenue. They're taking our stuff and they're putting it out there all over the place, not paying anything for it, you know, from what I understand, and gobbling the advertising dollars. You know, is there something that, you know, government could do there that, you know, where some of that ad revenue goes to, you know, the generators, you know? I don't know. I mean, you know, if I had the answer to that question, I would probably be running a news organization or something right now, you know, but that's not really my expertise. So that's a good question. And I got to go back here.
Yeah.
Get you again.
So I'm been a subscriber for 20 years, and my question is, how much of the content on a daily paper is Associated Press content? How much of it is McClatchy content? And then how much is it local content from creators like you?
With the NNO, okay.
Yep,
Your
with the
question
NNO.
is how much of what you read in the NNO is locally generated versus you know, coming from AP or New York Times Wire or whatever. I don't know. When I flip the paper, I do see a lot of, you know, local coverage, a lot of local stories. But to be honest, you know, the paper's also shrunk in size, and probably some of the loss in that shrinkage has been, you know, the national and international news. You know, where I think newspapers have sort of taken it on the thinking that, well, you know, readers are probably getting that from, you know, Washington Post, New York Times.
See, I think it's the opposite, though, where
Okay.
it's more AP stories and McClatchy stories that I don't have to pay for. I can get it for free. And my observation is they've cut people like you. They've cut, you know, the Chapel Hill News, the Orange County beat reporter, the Durham County beat reporter, and that's the stuff that I want to read, not the stuff that I can get for free on the internet.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, you have a point. I spoke to that earlier. You know, we used to have an Orange County bureau. We had a you know, it was right there on Chapel Hill Street. You know, and as part of the, you know, the cutbacks, you know, and there are various reasons for that. You know, as you guys may know this, that you know, back 20 years ago, I mean, we had a sometimes a section, sometimes two sections of classified ads. You know, well, along came Craigslist. It was gone overnight. You know, and I'm not faulting Craigslist. They came up with a better model that suited the, you know, the world that we're in. You know, we haven't figured out how to you know, bounce back from that. But when that happens, you know, you end up having to cut expenses. You know, and obviously part of cutting expenses is your labor cost, and so we've had buyouts and we've had layoffs. We've actually been able to bring back some positions the last couple of years, particularly, you know, somebody covering the environment, which is just critically important, you know, to everyone, you know, in the state. But I don't know. You know, I don't have a copy of the NNO to pull up here to just say, okay, well, this is local, this is local, this is local. So I can't. It's hard for me to make. But that's what I see when I pick up paper. I do see a lot of local stories in there. And as for the web, you know, the webpage, that's like a bottomless pit. I mean, you can put all kinds of stuff up there. So it's kind of hard to, talk about that. But you are right. I mean, we don't have the reporting that we had, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Okay, I knew you raised your hand first, but
I don't want to preempt our president's.
I've got a question here from somebody who I didn't think that's a question.
If somebody has not asked, please call them.
Okay, okay.
So, how is it done in other countries? The BBC comes to mind. I don't know the details, but I like their quality of reporting, and it seems like they do a good job. Somewhere there might be a model that's working and surviving.
Yeah. Your question is, other countries, they do have state-supported news, and it still remains credible. BBC being one of those organizations in one of those countries. Can we do something like that here? Obviously, we do have NPR here. There is a respected model there. I don't know. I guess I'm probably not the best person to answer that question. It's just something that I think about it like you all do, but I'm just not in a position to advocate one way or the other about where we should go with that. I would personally, though, what I would like to see is that we do that we are supported by the public, through subscriptions, through advertising, through sometimes we have events, different kinds of things that we do. Because the more independent, a media organization is, I feel like the more likely they're going to tell it like it is.
Thank you, Dave. I just wanted to mention that my trip to Italy this summer was to engage with other Rotary clubs, study their food, their culture, and I appreciate you guys funding that. But everyone have a wonderful weekend, and we'll send out an e-bite regarding the cookout as well as the tailgate this weekend. Thank you.
How are you? Good.